Good evening, everyone, and welcome. My name is Reba Gillis. I'm an M4 at New York Medical College. I am also this year's National Vice President of the SNMA, and I just want to welcome you again to the episode, the emergency medicine episode of our Sowing Seeds specialty. So this series is a part of our Sowing Seeds program created by our National President, Asase Obo, in collaboration with the Academic Affairs National Committee. Throughout this year-long program, we will be providing resources to you all on how to succeed as a pre-med and medical student. And we plan to touch on everything from financial literacy to preparing for board exams and more. So make sure that you're a national member by visiting the snma.org and signing up to stay in the know. So I'm going to start off by introducing our panelists. And first up, we have Dr. Alden Landry, who is Assistant Dean's Office of Diversity and Inclusion and Community Partnership at Harvard Medical School, as well as Assistant Professor in Emergency Medicine at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center. Next up, we have Dr. Star McKnight, and she is the Director of Diversity and Inclusion, as well as the Emergency Ultrasound Co-Fellowship Director at University of California, San Francisco, and the Emergency Ultrasound Director at Zuckerberg San Francisco General Hospital. We also have Dr. Kristen Smith, who is a PGY3 in the Department of Emergency Medicine at Einstein Medical Center. And we have Dr. Simisola Alalade, who is a PGY1 at the Highland Hospital. So I'm going to begin by asking you all to explain where you trained for medical school and where you are now today. Does anyone want to start up?
I can start. So my name's Star Knight. I'm originally from Los Angeles, California. I went to medical school at the Medical College of Wisconsin. It was a far cry, far away from Los Angeles. It's freezing out there. I ended up getting some mentors in emergency medicine in medical school. But ended up training at Highland Hospital in Oakland, California, part of the Alameda County Medical Center, and went on to do a fellowship in ultrasound, emergency ultrasound at UC San Francisco, and I stayed on at UC San Francisco, and I'm currently the ultrasound director for the San Francisco General County Hospital, and I'm also the co-fellowship director in addition to the diversity and inclusion, the director of diversity and inclusion for my department at UCSF.
Dr. Landry?
Good evening, everybody. Alden Landry, I'm an emergency medicine physician at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center. But I am originally from Texas, born in right outside of Houston, Texas. Went to a small HBCU, Prairie View A&M University for my undergrad. Ended up going to the University of Alabama School of Medicine for medical school. It was through a series of fortunate events where I ended up doing a visiting clerkship rotation here in Boston. And I was fortunate to match at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center for my residency. I ended up staying here after my residency and doing a fellowship in minority health policy through the Commonwealth Fund Fellowship. Got my MPH at that time. And then have stayed all around and done work in sort of this space of medical education, health policy, advocacy work, as well as practicing emergency medicine here in Boston. So happy to answer questions and looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you so much. Dr. Alalade?
Hi, everyone. Good evening as well. My name is Simi Alalade. You guys can call me Simi. I'm from Chicago, Illinois. I ended up going to Emory for undergrad and then made my way back to Chicago and attended Rush Medical College. I was lucky enough to be able to do a lot of rotations at Cook County Hospital as well, where I fell in love with county medicine and ended up finding my way to California, where I am currently finishing up my first year of residency at Highland Hospital and still trying to figure out where I'm going from here, but it's been great so far.
Great. And Dr. Smith?
Hi, everyone. I'm Kristen Smith. I am a PGY3 at Einstein Medical Center. In Philadelphia, PA. There is one in New York, but I'm not at the New York program. I'm at the program in Philadelphia. I originally went to Case Western for undergrad, and then I went to the Rowan University School of Osteopathic Medicine in Southern New Jersey for medical school. So if you have any questions, I'm here to answer and look forward to speaking with you all.
All right, so the next question is going to be, how did you choose emergency medicine? And we can go back to Dr. Smith to start.
So I really chose emergency medicine during my third year. When I entered medical school, I thought I was going to enter family medicine, just because that's what I had some exposure to and kind of knew the most about. But I didn't decide on emergency medicine until my third year, when I was actually on my family med rotation. And during that rotation, I got to do a 2-week rotation at a very small rural ER. During that short amount of time, I saw that emergency medicine was more for me, more my speed. I liked the amount of procedures that were being done. I liked the acuity level of the patients. It varies, obviously. It depends on whether you're at a level 1 or what have you, but it depends. You get a lot more variety in your cases, and I really just fell in love with it. So when I entered my 4th year, I knew I wanted to do emergency medicine. So I really doubled down on getting some auditions and applying.
And Dr. Alawade?
For me, right after I finished my undergrad degree, I ended up becoming a scribe, like many people do, at a local emergency department where I was from. And I think that was when I had the most exposure to medicine. A lot of those physicians there ended up becoming my mentors. And not only did they, have me be a scribe, but they wanted me to think critically about patients. They would ask me what I would do. They really integrated me into the care. So that was my first exposure to emergency medicine. But when I started medical school, I decided to remain open. I ended up liking a lot of rotations. Like, I loved surgery. I thought I would do that. Wasn't for me. And I ended up, at the end of third year, after going through the majority of rotations, I still didn't find something that completely clicked until I did my first ED rotation as early as possible. And we had to wait until 4th year. I did it at Cook County. I felt like it was home. I love being able to see patients from any background or any demographic. I love being able to use my hands and use my mind at the same time. And then every subsequent rotation that I did after just kind of solidified the decision that I made. And I think that I chose a really great path.
Okay. Dr. Knight?
So I similarly didn't have an emergency medicine rotation during my 3rd year. I entered into medical school with a very open mind. I'm originally a basketball player. I've been playing basketball most of my life. So I definitely was attracted to the team environment in emergency medicine. But even prior to that exposure, I really enjoyed most of my rotations and could see myself thought about myself doing each of those specialties. And I think one thing that's difficult to think of is when you're a medical student, sometimes you are enjoying the rotation for other reasons. Maybe you like the schedule, maybe you like the team, maybe you like your role as a medical student, but if you really start to think about yourself in that attending role, your viewpoint starts to change. And I ended up being linked with a mentor on my peds rotation that was a peds EM doc, and his role was just to walk us through our presentations. And I reached out to him during one of my lighter rotations during psychiatry and started to shadow him and got that early exposure, which kind of planted the seed. And after doing some away rotations in my 4th year, I went over to Highland. I fell in love with it and really further cemented that interest. But I definitely approach things with an open mind, and really it's about, to me, it's about being a part of the community, and the fact that the ED is a microcosm of what's going on in the community. And I continue to work in the county emergency department, so I pretty much have a pulse on what's happening in the community at all times when I'm on shift.
And so I would say my experience mirrors everything that's already been said. I think it's really appropriate that this is entitled Sowing Seeds, because my journey to emergency medicine started at a very early spot, in a very early time for me as a pre-medical student. So I did a iteration of the program that you all now know as SHPEP, or Summer Health Professions Education Program. It was before SMDEP or SMEP or MMEP. Those are the different iterations of the program. But I did it at the University of Alabama. And when I was there, the one shadowing experience we had was in the emergency department. And I met a physician, and I shadowed him. And, you know, that program only allows for a limited amount of shadowing time, but I shadowed him, and it was a phenomenal experience. But in my mind, I'd always envisioned myself as some sort of surgeon, or potentially doing some sort of procedural subspecialty in medicine. And I wasn't thinking emergency medicine for a career. Fast forward to when I get to medical school, and, you know, with your traditional medical schools where you have 2 and 2, when you have 2 years in the classroom and then 2 years in the wards, you know, you really only have that 3rd year window to figure out what you're going to go into. And what I realized, which is very similar to what Dr. Knight was just saying, is there were things that I liked about rotations, but I didn't love them. And so it just so happened that I went back and talked to that same doctor that I shadowed in the emergency department when I was a pre-med, and I was like, I don't know what to do, because I'm not necessarily happy in any of these specialties. And so he asked me what I liked. And so he asked me about pediatrics and neurology and psychiatry and surgery. And as we went through each rotation, the things that I commented on that I liked the most about those rotations tended to be things that were skewed towards emergency medicine. And as we continued to have this conversation, it wasn't as if he was pushing me into emergency medicine, is that he was showing me that I had already guided myself into that space. And it was just now time for me to make that leap and commit to emergency medicine. And I was fortunate to have him as a mentor along the way, to have a couple other people who identified as mentors along the way. And then I had some classmates who are also great in supporting me and encouraging me along the way. And we had our cohort of folks working together to talk about away rotations, giving each other tips about programs to potentially apply to, knowing each other's interests. And it just so happened that the right people were in my life at that time to help me get to where I needed to be for my career. And I 100% agree with everything that's been said. It's the team, it's the variety, it's the pace, it's understanding, you know, the impacts of sort of medicine as it reflects on society, as a microcosm of society. It's understanding that there is complete variability in your life as a doctor, and it's no day is the same. And all of those things I really enjoy. And then there's some things that I learned about emergency medicine after I matched into the specialty, finished my residency, and done my fellowship, that I enjoyed even more, including the ability to adjust my schedule according to meet the administrative and needs or the personal needs, so that I can now, you know, make sure that I'm at the bus stop to get my kids to school, or I can schedule to be off so I can, you know, attend, you know, a class recital or soccer game. And that's the flexibility that comes with our specialty, where we're not wed to our clinical schedule and our OR time. So it's a great specialty as you think about what you need in your life and how you are going to be adjusting according to if there's other things that you think are going to be important for you feeling whole as a physician.
So I'm hearing a lot of wonderful things that I love about this field. I'm hearing about the high acuity, the procedures, the variety, and getting a touch on your community. I thought that was an amazing aspect that you touched on, Dr. Knight. I'm also hearing about mentorship and just how important and how significant it was for your experiences. And so can you talk about how you found your mentors and how you maintain the relationship with your mentors, and just any advice that you have of finding mentors in the field of emergency medicine? So we can start with Dr. Landry.
Yeah, I mean, I think especially in this time, it's really important for students to be proactive in this space. And there's a great saying. It's a little cheesy, but it's truly honest. It's network or not work. And I think at this time, as if you're a rising third year going into fourth year and you're interested in emergency medicine, with the pause on away rotations that many programs are doing, where we would typically use that for auditioning. I think it's really important for you to network and build those relationships within your institution. If you have a program, if you don't have a program, it's important for you to get on and start emailing and talking to people using networks like the SNMA, the NMA, using networks like that's available through SAEM and the RAMS section of SAEM. Because it's really important for you to build those relationships early on. For those students who are earlier on in your career, you have a little bit more time to work on your trajectory with your mentors. But it really takes, I now tell students, the onus is on you. You have to build that relationship. You have to start it. And it starts with an email. It starts with setting up a time for, in this space, in this day and age, a Zoom call or FaceTiming or Skype, whatever it is that you use for your interactions with people. Find people that have similarities to you as far as background, area of interest, career trajectories, people that are doing cool things that you're interested in. But then also look for people that potentially can help you along the way to get to that next step. And so, when you're looking for mentors, it's not always the oldest person in the room. It's not the person who's the chair of the department. It may be that resident or that junior attending who you start to engage with, because they can be the ones that can start to open your eyes and give you some more advice and insight as to sort of those next steps, that 3 to 5 year phase, as opposed to somebody who's more senior, who's thinking about this from a long-term career trajectory, which may put you beyond steps that you're not ready for. And then also, the fact of the matter remains, they may be working with you and offering you outdated advice because they're giving you advice from 20 years ago when things, the system has changed, and they may not be as adept to what's happening now with ERAS or what's happening now with the application process to residency, or they may not necessarily be practicing as much clinically and moving on into other spaces, which is not uncommon in emergency medicine. So I say all that to say, be engaging with people, reaching out, be honest, be upfront, and ask questions. Show interest, and eventually those relationships will start to mature over time if you continue to do your part in making sure that those relationships are going to be sustainable.
Thank you. Dr. Knight?
I would definitely echo some of the same sentiments and some of the same advice that Dr. Landry mentioned. I think that we're in a very interesting time right now in regards to how the pandemic has affected medical education. And so for the rising fourth year students, the third year students that will be fourth year students, I think similar to what Dr. Landry mentioned, it's going to be extremely important for you to reach out to people in different programs. And feel free, of course, to reach out to any of us on this panel. But in particular, when you're looking at programs, you should look at the makeup of their residency program to see if, because you won't be able, unfortunately, to get that away rotation experience, but to see if these residents tend to have some of the values systems that you hold high. And so reaching out to residents, I think, is imperative. And interns and first and second year residents, their perspective is supreme, because they have that, they're not tainted, and they know exactly why they went into that program, and they're able to give you that firsthand experience as to if their expectations are met and where their expectations have fallen short in those programs. For the more junior students, you definitely have time, and you have time to research which mentors you want. But similar to what Dr. Landry mentioned, you're going to want a variety of mentors. And so you can have mentors that are peers. You can have a mentor that's just one class ahead of you, who's able to direct you and help navigate your current campus, in addition to resident mentors and attending mentors. I think each mentor is able to offer you something. And I would just kind of looking toward the future, just reminding you that mentorship doesn't end once you are done with medical school, once you're done with residency, once you're in attending. You will always need mentors in your life. And depending on what your career interests are, they might be from other departments and other specialties. And just to keep an open mind, you might notice that you already are in a mentorship relationship, you just hadn't identified it as such.
Thank you. Dr. Smith?
So everything that's already been said is very spot on. I think, so for me, the way I found my mentor or the mentors that I have in emergency medicine, I actually went to a mentor that I had at my medical school. I approached her in third year. She was the dean of curriculum development. She was a family physician, but I just asked her, you know, hey, I have this interest in emergency medicine. Do you know anyone I can get in contact with? And then from there, she led me to a few alumni who were emergency physicians and were able to tell me more about the field. So I think it's very important to kind of keep the mentorship relationships that you already have going, but you can also ask your current mentors if they happen to be in a field that you are not pursuing, if they're not in emergency medicine, hey, do you know anyone who's an EM doc that I could speak with? That usually is helpful because that potential mentor is more likely to respond favorably back to you because they have a personal connection with someone that you know. I'd also just echo what everyone has been saying, Doctors Landry and Knight, about being proactive during this time. With COVID, obviously, everything is changing in terms of being able to do audition rotations, and that won't be happening. So I think it really is a time for students to take that initiative to reach out to people at programs that they want to go to. I'd really suggest that you reach out to the faculty and attendings, but also reach out to the residents, reach out to the chief resident, and they may be able to get you in touch with one of the residents there just to get some information about general information about the program that you aren't going to get on the website. I think a lot of things that you guys unfortunately are going to lose as rising fourth year students is getting that informal look at a program. A program may seem great on the website, but they may not be so great in real life. So you do have to be proactive in getting that information. And I would say two other resources to kind of look into is ask your medical school if they have any alumna listservs or alumni database that has where people are practicing and in what specialties, and that may be a way to kind of make a connect there. And then also the IMRA has a diversity and inclusion committee that actually just started a diversity mentoring initiative. So you can sign up on that website and get a mentor as well. And then obviously reaching out to any or all of us on this panel. And I definitely think that everyone should have at least two mentors. You should have someone who is one step ahead of you. And then also you should have someone who is several steps ahead and is modeling what you want to do ultimately in your career.
Thank you. Dr. Alalade?
So everyone pretty much said a lot of the things that I would have suggested. For me, just kind of finishing the application cycle most recently, I found that it was most easy to connect with my peers. My medical school was very collegiate, and so it was awesome to just reach out to all of the previous the rising like fourth years who had matched into EM or were considering EM and kind of using them as a guide in following their path. They, you know, many people decide to, after they are interested in emergency medicine, they also figure out if they like academic medicine, if they like county medicine, if they want to be in the community, and kind of trying to figure out where you fit in and understand which steps to take. They also know the mentors to reach out to or attendings that are open to guiding students. So I would say just if you shy away a little bit from reaching out to attendings or don't want to code email or kind of go on these websites and you feel like you might be a burden or overwhelm people, use your peers. They're there for you. And most people are very open to being a mentor and helping other people, go down this path. So that's that.
Thank you all so much. I'm taking all these mental notes. Got to get my email game up and going. Dr. Landry.
Can I just add something to that? Because that was a really important comment about using the people who just graduated from your institution as potential leverage points for getting to residencies. They chose someone from your institution for a reason. And if you have similar attributes to both that person and then also a similar interest in that program, it's going to be really helpful for you, because program directors are going to be looking for whatever they can to try and anchor in on what's going to be a good fit for their program. And I hate the term fit, so I don't use that term as loosely as others may use it. But I think that it's really important for you to take advantage of those relationships that are pre-existing. And then just in the conversations I've been having with program directors, as we talk about promoting diversity here at Harvard Medical School and the affiliated hospitals, the one thing that the program directors are continuing to tell me, and I want to make sure I reiterate to you all, is you have to reach out. You have to be engaging those programs now, because the more they know that you're interested, I think the reality is the more they're going to pay attention to your application. I don't know how this application season is going to shake out, whether they're going to limit the number of places that students can apply, because I honestly feel that there's going to be some students who, despite how well their application looks, they're going to over apply just because of how atypical this application season is going to be. And so you have to do something that's going to differentiate yourself aside from a solid, slow or letter of recommendation or your personal statement. And a lot of it starts with building those relationships now. So when you reach out to a program director, it's a short introduction about who you are, why you're interested in that particular program, and then also a specific ask that's not easily available on just a glance at the website. So is there something related to the program that you're interested in? Do they have an advanced ultrasound rotation for residents, and ultimately do those residents go in to do fellowship? Is there space and opportunity for residents to get engaged in policy work at their institution? Whatever it may be that fits with what you currently think you're interested in when it comes to emergency medicine, and also where you think your career may be taking you. When you ask those questions, the program directors are going to look at you a little bit more seriously, because you're not just going to be someone who's shotgun applying to 50, 60 programs. You start to show that you're looking at programs with precision.
Thank you so much for the advice. So we're going to open up to questions from our audience. So the first question is, how would you say you deal with the potential high psychological toll that emergency medicine can have? That's a really good question, so I'll open it for Dr. Knight to start.
That's a wonderful question. I think that many times when we elevate levels of education, when we jump from med school to residency, and beyond, we have to keep in mind what wellness practices kept us sane up until that point, and keep those wellness practices in place. And for me, those wellness practices include keeping my tribe close by. And so I have an amazing group of course, family, but in addition, friends that I lean on heavily during times of strife. I also make sure that I exercise regularly. That is something that keeps me sane. And I think having healthy support systems in your life is key. And what I find in regards to like conflict at work and psychological toll, whether it's the patients that you're taking care of, some of the socioeconomic issues and social determinants of health that you don't have as big of impact on, or whether it's disgruntled consultants, I find that people that are less happy at work are really less happy in their overall lives. So the more that you can do to strive to get that balance in your life and to get that wellness and that happiness internally, the more that shines through in your presence at work and outside of the hospital.
That's beautifully said. Does anyone else want to add on?
Yeah, the one thing that I'll add is you can't take this stuff home with you. And one of the things that a mentor actually told me in this space was when you're in emergency medicine, bad things happen. And there's a certain amount that you can control. You are going into a specialty where you have to deal with the unknown and you have to make decisions based off of limited information. And we're all trying to do what's best for our patients. And what you have to do is do the best you can in the time you have with the resources that you have, understanding that their condition that brought you to them to the emergency department was not caused by you, and their outcomes may not always be in your control. And if, for me, I would lean on my faith and say that it's not my will, but His will be done. And so you have to accept that beyond what you are competent and capable and able to do, sometimes it is predetermined that something else will happen. And so you can't take this home with you. Otherwise, the specialty will eat you alive with the sad things that you'll see. Then on the other side is you have some really interesting, amazing interactions with people that can really change your perspective on life. The smallest conversations that you can have with patients, and that quick word that they can give you, or the interactions that you can have with people in the specialty can really help for longevity. With what tonight's about having a tribe and keeping your people together. I know the group probably making fun of me right now with some of the comments that I'm saying, but it's just part of having a strong group around you to keep you supportive and keep you moving and keeping you sane.
So we have another question. How early do we start reaching out to programs that we're interested in? For reference, I'm a rising third year. Dr. Landry, I think you touched a little bit on it, but would you like to?
Yeah, what I would say is that advice is really for students who are going into their fourth years. For the students who are rising third years, I think it's okay to sort of sit back and wait and see how things are going to play out, especially, we certainly hope that we are able to host students as part of away rotations coming up for what would be their fourth year. But starting, when you get to the second half of your third year, I think it's appropriate to start building those relationships, especially if there's a program that you're keenly interested in for a particular reason, or you want to rotate. If you want to come and do the visiting clerkship program at Harvard Medical School, to be honest with you, to do a rotation with us, the application process starts 5 or 6 months in advance. So if you want to rotate with us in June, you need to be interacting with my office in January, so we can make sure we have the space available for you and housing and so on and so forth. So I would say 5-6 months before you start to rotate is when you should start engaging those programs. But if there's a particular reason, a particular area of interest, it's okay to start interacting with programs a little bit earlier.
Would anyone else like to add?
I would just add something that has kind of been mentioned, but I just want to make sure it's clear. The more connections you have at whichever program you really want to go to, the easier it will be for you to get in a great position on the match. So that means if you're reaching out to, like we mentioned, several different emergency physicians at different levels of training, and those people are able to speak towards your passion for the field, your interest in whatever subspecialty or particular area of emergency medicine that you're focused on. If they're able to speak towards that when it comes time to looking at applicants and determining which applicants should be placed where on the rank list, if you have 5 people that are able to speak towards your passion, that's gonna just propel you along that rank list. Everyone on this call probably knows how that goes and knows that people get very passionate about the people that we really want and people we really want to work with. And so I think if you're rising third year, like you're going into your third year, you want to make sure that you do well during your third year on your core rotations, and be sure and certain that you want to go into emergency medicine. But it doesn't hurt to start to reach out to to attendings or to residents to get that extra information, to cement whether or not this is a specialty that you like. And depending on your structure in your medical school, as we all have mentioned, many of us weren't allowed or allotted rotations as our third years when we were third year medical students. So it would behoove you to just reach out and see if you could get into a shadow shift position during your third year at any point.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to add anything?
No, I think it was all covered.
Okay. Well, I want to ask a question for our residents. How was the transition for you from being a medical student to being a resident?
I thought it was a tough transition. I think a lot of medical schools, unfortunately, don't really prepare you for moving on from medical school to residency. And I think although you are in the clinical setting in your third and fourth year, your role is very limited. So you don't really get intensive training on EMRs and how to do certain procedures. At least at my medical school, I did not. So I do think there's a very big learning curve. I think something that helped, at least with my transition, is at my residency, we had a month-long orientation where we went over basic procedures like central line insertion, putting in ultrasound-guided IVs, INDs, stuff like that, and then going over some basic topics in emergency medicine of how to work up chest pain and shortness of breath. I think that really helped me feel like the transition was doable. I think, again, this is an area where you should lean on your mentors, especially those who, like I said, maybe one step ahead of you. So if you're a fourth year medical student, maybe someone who just graduated and is entering their intern year or is a senior level resident, because they can have some really good tips on what you should be reading, maybe how you should be studying. Are there certain procedure websites you should be going on to in order to stay up to date? But I think it's a hard transition. I think everyone feels it in every single specialty, just because the way your clerkships are is very different than the way your intern year will go. And there's a lot of growing pains, and you just kind of have to work through it. Maintaining close contact with your family, with your friends from med school, and your friends outside of medicine, I think also helps with just dealing with the transition.
Yeah, I 100% agree. My medical school had an intern boot camp, and it was towards the end of the year. You kind of have matched, you don't have a lot of responsibilities, but I think it was actually a great time to pay attention and take away those pearls. And then luckily I had a 1 month orientation where we learned about the EMR, we learned procedures, we talked to different specialties, we learned how the laboratory works. We even rotated in the lab, which was pretty awesome. And then also knowing that you get more autonomy as an intern, but not too much that you will likely kill somebody. And so just rest assured that, one, you can ask questions and don't be afraid to be completely wrong. Like I would look an attending dead in their eyes and say, I have no idea what to do. And it feels so wrong because fourth year, your job was to always be right and know what was going on. But as an intern, you kind of have a little bit of room to know that you can be wrong and you learn from those lessons. And then also, I think a big thing that a lot of interns are still working on is how to study while working, how to engage in learning and not being able to sit down and read a textbook for 8 or 9 hours a day after, you work 14-hour shifts. It's possible, you'll do it. And then again, just finding ways to keep up your wellness. I think I'm still trying to figure that out. I tried to exercise, Dr. Knight, it's not working. I will call you. Yeah, hanging out with friends, staying connected to just like humanity. You're going to see a lot of tough things that you didn't really understand as a medical student. And just yeah, getting used to growth and growing and knowing that it's uncomfortable.
Thank you for that. So the next post says, thank you all for taking the time to do this. The question is, given that doing away rotations are limited this year, what are your thoughts on virtual EM electives during the season and the wait during this upcoming application cycle? So Dr. Landry, would you like to start?
Yeah, I'll try and tackle that one. So great question. I think that a virtual EM elective is just another way of a program to offer students a space to learn more about our specialty and to potentially learn more about that program. I think a lot of institutions are using it as a recruitment tool. And so I think, just for full disclosure, when you see those, that's part of what they're offering. But then they're also truly trying to prepare students for careers in emergency medicine. I would also just be sure to make sure that you don't have high expectations about outcomes for that, because doing these virtual electives may not necessarily come with a SLO, which is the standard letter of evaluation that's so important in emergency medicine. So I think that you need to make sure that you understand if that is an offer and if you're looking for it in for that particular reason. And then the last thing I would say is just be cognizant of everything else that's happened to you during this sort of time, your disruption of your medical education due to COVID. For some students, your entire third year was shifted back, and you didn't necessarily get to do that medicine rotation, or your plans for your sub-Is that you have to do as part of your graduation requirements are completely thrown off. And so if there's a conflict, I would say the virtual EM electives are great, but they aren't necessarily going to be the priority when it comes to making sure that you have all the necessary components of your application before going to residency.
Thank you for that. And then the next question is, what do you think are the lasting implications from COVID-19 on this specialty? So I'll ask Dr. Knight to start with this one.
Wow. I think that there are going to be so many lasting impressions from COVID-19 and from this pandemic on our lives in general and society as a whole. I think our specialty, the interesting thing is, and everyone can definitely chime in on their experience, it has been interesting to see how many different specialties have faded to black and just faded to the background in the midst of this pandemic, and just kind of handed the limelight to emergency medicine physicians and later on intensivists. And so I think what I'm hoping is that I think that we get a lot of respect in the hospital, and depends on your hospital, how much respect your specialty gets, how much respect the ED gets. But I'm hoping that it shines a more national spotlight on the sacrifices we make every day with undifferentiated patients, with local and national emergencies, and how we step up time after time again. Whether that's in the ED or on an airplane or on a bus or wherever you tend to be, or the grocery store. And so I can't say that that our specialty has changed much, except that we are getting the recognition that we deserve. That's kind of my perspective on that question. In regards to like day-to-day lives, I think we all have probably altered our disinfection routine and how we change out of scrubs and what we bring home and how we kind of disinfect ourselves. And I'm hoping that our society in general will be a little bit cleaner and after this pandemic in regards to hand washing and just being more cognizant of how germs spread. But I think our specialty will hopefully get the limelight nationally that we deserve. And what that means to me is that we are there regardless of what's going on, regardless of whether it's a global pandemic, whether it's 9/11, whether there's a local emergency, or a hurricane in your area, we are the physicians on the ground in the trenches getting it done.
You all are really the front lines of this pandemic right now. Would anyone else like to add?
I would just say amen to that.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
Okay, so the next question is how to best decipher those intangible characteristics of a program without seeing it. Do you have any suggestions that can help to determine if the program is a good fit while, of course, still remaining professional?
I think this is a great question. I think, unfortunately, there is some difficulty to really get kind of answers to those intangible characteristics without being on a rotation. However, you can, again, reach out. You should be reaching out, like Drs. Landry and Knight said, about reaching out to the program leadership and asking questions that can't be easily found on the website. That obviously shows that you are interested in the program, but I also think you should be reaching out to not only the chief residents, but also to residents at the program. So if you're able to go to the website, a lot of times, a lot of the residencies have pictures of the residents with a little blurb and also their email. And just sending an email to a resident saying that you are interested in the program, but you have a few questions. Are they willing to answer your questions, or are they willing to maybe talk to you via Zoom or answer a phone call, I think is really helpful. I think that going through chief residents is great because they have like a bird's eye view of the program, and they often have some say, at least a little more than just the average resident in terms of saying who they like and who they would like to interview. But I also think that choosing residents who aren't in an administrative role is also helpful because they're more likely to give you a very honest answer. So some of these intangibles that you may be interested in that you don't feel comfortable asking to someone in an administrative role, you should be able to ask to someone who is just in the program and going along. I think that really reaching out and using residents as a resource during this time can get you the answers to some of those questions that you will not get answers to on the website or even via Zoom calls or webinars that the residency is hosting.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to add anything?
I just want to say that I agree 100%. You have to talk to residents, especially in this time. It's extremely limited. It will be difficult to kind of figure out where you belong. A lot of the decisions are based on a feel on interview day, and you can still get that while talking to attendings. You'll be interviewed by attendings and residents as well. And some programs even have other staff interview applicants. I use websites, definitely see how people talk about themselves and how programs highlight their residents. If it's a more personal feel about who they are outside of medicine, or is it more academic? Does it seem more stringent? They're just like little clues that you can get from doing your background research, and then of course talking to the residents who recently matched and why they chose their program or what they liked at different interviews. I would say be very apprehensive about what you see on online forums. It's kind of easy to go down a rabbit hole. I was one who did it. I'm trying to hear and listen to everyone's specific opinion about a program. But what you don't get is the context of that person's personality. So just know who you are and be okay with saying, what you might have a colleague that's amazing, but what they like may not be what you like. So kind of do a lot of reflection and then see if there's just like a connection that you have during your interview season or from the responses that you get from attendings or residents.
Thank you. So one more question and then we're going to close out. I've heard from various EM docs that research is not as critical in emergency medicine. What do you think about that, and what would you consider being the most important aspect? Would anyone like to tackle this question?
I can jump in. I don't know if Dr. Knight has some comments on this, but I would say it's simply this. It's not mandatory to be a part of your application. It does help. My advice for pre-meds applying to medical school is very similar to what I say for residents, in that there's no perfect application, and putting together your application to residency is like trying to put together a puzzle, but not knowing exactly what the puzzle pieces are going to look like in the end. And your job is to take the pieces that you have and make them look as pretty as possible. And that's what you present to the program directors. If your emphasis during medical school was on community service, engagement through the SNMA, if it was, trying to make sure that you were doing your best academically because you didn't have a strong academic background before medical school, and so you focused on school and research wasn't a priority for you, then that's just what it is. But you need to make sure that your application represents who you are and it points to the future that you have at that residency and then potentially beyond in the specialty of emergency medicine. If you are looking at a program like mine, I think research is valued a little bit more than others. And there are some programs where research is valued more than others. And I think there's some places where activism and engagement is valued more than research. And so I think it depends on the program that you're applying to. But I also think that you shouldn't just do something just to check a box to make your application look better. I think you should do the things that you're most passionate about, and make sure that you fill your time and use your time wisely, because you don't have very much free time in medical school anyways. I wouldn't want you spending it on something that you don't value and you don't think is actually something that's going to be necessarily something that you plan on doing long term. Now, if you've never done research and you want to give it a try, kick the tires and see if it's something you like, it completely makes sense. But if you know that isn't the direction that you want to go for your career, then just doing it to check the box to get into residency is not a great idea.
I would just echo exactly what you said. You want to do something that you're passionate about, and whether that's community engagement or whether that's playing an instrument and performing, you don't want to have a project that you really didn't care that much about and you let fall to the wayside because you weren't as passionate about it. I think similar to what Dr. Landry mentioned, some programs are gonna place emphasis on research. It is not as consistently highly valued as other specialties, but it's definitely valued. If you started a research project, we're going to look to see that you started something and finished it through. So you want to do something that you have passion for. And it doesn't necessarily have to be research. And my program in particular, we kind of try to look at the whole person holistically. Whatever it is your passion is, we're excited for you to bring that to the program.
Great. So, Dr. Knight, I wanted to give you the opportunity to make a few final comments.
I will have to cut out a little soon for another panel, but it was wonderful engaging with you all and being alongside wonderful panelists. Thank you for this opportunity. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions about UCSF in general, other programs in the Bay Area, and I'd be happy to answer your questions or connect you with other people who can answer your questions. If you have questions about emergency ultrasound, I'm happy to answer those as well. Nice to meet all of you. Thank you again for the opportunity.
Thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it tonight. And if the rest of you all can stick around for a few more questions that we have. I wanted to start off with a question about subspecialties. So if you all could talk about the subspecialties that exist within emergency medicine. With Dr. Landry, can you start?
Yeah, as Dr. Knight just mentioned, she does ultrasound, which is a huge component of emergency medicine. We use it as a diagnostic tool. all the time. It's something that some of our colleagues are subspecialized and specifically trained in. Pediatric emergency medicine is another space that many people have interest in. There's two routes to pediatric emergency medicine. One is doing an EM residency and then going on and doing a pediatrics EM specialty, subspecialty training, or going through pediatrics and then doing the fellowship. It varies depending on which programs prefer which residents from which track. There's other specialties like toxicology, sports medicine, hyperbarics. There's other clinical subspecialties, but I think the great thing about emergency medicine is there's a lot of not necessarily clinical fellowships like operations or administration. There's EMS. There's opportunities to do education fellowships. But then the great thing about emergency medicine, you can do in spaces where I am in. I did a fellowship in health policy, which is not related specifically to emergency medicine, but took me outside of the emergency department. And I brought with me my knowledge, my skill set from the emergency department into a space where a lot of emergency medicine docs weren't operating in before. Now it's really common to see a lot of EM docs in the space related to health policy, but it's interesting to see people coming along and doing it. Then there's research fellowship. So I think I say all this to say that there's a ton of options in emergency medicine, or you can be just an emergency doc, which is also just a rewarding and fulfilling experience.
Thank you so much. So I guess this is more for the residents. What do you all wish you had known as an M1, knowing what you know now? We can start with Dr. Smith.
So know that you will get to the end or approach the end. I'm at a 4-year program, but know that it comes sooner than you think. Really just knowing that there is a learning curve and you will get through it. I think I wish as an M1, I would have sorry, I just reread that. Okay, so it's an M1, not an intern, excuse me. So as a first-year medical student, I think you should have a focus on wanting to really hone in and get as much foundational knowledge as you can. That helps with any residency, any specialty that you want to go into, is really solidifying your foundational medical knowledge and then building upon that in your clinical years in 3rd and 4th year. And then obviously as you receive your residency training. So I think when you're entering medical school for all the pre-meds, entering your first year of medical school, it's making sure that you do what you need to do in order to make sure you gain a good fund of knowledge. Also knowing that what you may have done in undergrad to study for your pre-med classes may or may not work in medical school, and figuring that out early and being willing to change your study patterns, your study habits. And then also, which has been echoed in many areas on this webinar, but just speaking about being able to ask questions. So if you find yourself struggling in a medical school class, or you're not sure how to study for anatomy lab, reaching out to other classmates, reaching out to the M2s and the senior level medical students, and also reaching out to the professor. Hey, I'm having some trouble grasping this concept. Do you have any advice? Other resources I can use to teach me? Do you have any tutoring slots? And really being proactive in your education.
Thank you. So we're just going to summarize the last question. So can you talk about your ability to impact your community with limited interaction time, and just how you navigate microaggressions in your specialty or against the community that you serve?
I'll take this one, and I will say this. Everybody comes with this mentality that you don't have longitudinal relationship with the patients. It's hard to actually have an impact when you are only seeing a patient for 15 minutes at a time. And I 100% disagree with that. I think that I've had some meaningful relationships and interactions with individuals in that short period of time, whether it's going in and talking to the young kid who's coming in with a sexually transmitted infection and like having that heart to heart in that 15-minute conversation and saying, look, man, you are messing up. This is what this could potentially lead to. Or talking to that older gentleman who's still smoking and talking about his lung disease and, telling him just raw, honest, advice on what smoking is going to lead to if he continues to do so. And I really think that, at least for me, I've had an impact. And I can say this having practiced for this long and for lack of a better term, having repeat customers coming to the emergency department and people I've seen over time. When I talk to those patients, they're like, I remember you. You're the one who told me to do X. You're the one who said this to me. And then just one other comment I'll say on this is with limited interaction time. Every time I see a young person, high school or younger, especially if they're Black, Latinx, the rare Native American patient that I take care of, in that range. Whenever I'm talking to them, the one thing that I can do is ask them how school is going, ask them what they want to be when they grow up, and then tell them that they can be a doctor. And I've gotten so many thank yous from parents because they said the doctor that was taking care of my daughter or son told them that they can also be a doctor. And so that, I think, is just as meaningful, even if it is a limited interaction.
Yes, just to echo what Dr. Landry said, a lot of you are going to be underrepresented in medicine. You existing as a physician, as a provider, it has such an immense impact on the way people interact with the healthcare system. I've gotten so much gratitude for just talking to people and existing. And you approach every patient, especially patients of color, in a way that you can just connect with them, and you build these quick interactions in 15 minutes, and they come with you and they tell you things that they've never told anybody else. So don't think that you don't have an impact because you're not volunteering. You still can volunteer, but the more autonomy, the more independence you have as a provider, the more you realize you are impacting your community in a great way.
Great. Dr. Smith, would you like to say a few words?
I think I'm just echoing what everyone else has said, but I definitely think you'd be surprised how much continuity of care that you actually give out to the community in the ER, especially depending on where you may be practicing. I think just kind of touching on the second question, which is pretty heavy and definitely can't be adequately addressed in a few minutes, but how you navigate microaggressions in your specialty or against the community you serve. So I am in North Philly, and I serve a predominantly African-American population. So I think a few things kind of addressing the microaggressions, but just your mere presence there makes a difference. Your mere presence in the residency, your presence as a attending physician, your presence in your medical school, all of that makes a difference and shows that, we are here and we're trying to better the field of medicine in general. I think also when you do have microaggressions that may come up, or someone said something that is insensitive or indicates that they have implicit bias based on race, gender, sexual orientation, I think trying to develop ways to address that and address it head on when it happens is really important. And then I also think, obviously, that's not easy to do, but it's something that I think as you get more comfortable in your field or whatever position you're in, that you should feel comfortable advocating for yourself and your patients and your colleagues. And then also making sure that you practice self-care, because there's going to be some days where someone may have said something that was inappropriate, but you just don't have the mental capacity to address it. I think a lot of us are feeling that with the murder of Mr. George Floyd. And I think that's okay too, because as a minority who is underrepresented in medicine, a lot of times in these spaces, people are looking at you to make comments or to advocate or to educate them on things that on issues of bias and racism and a lot of different issues. And sometimes you may not have the mental capacity and the emotional strength to do that at this time, and that is okay as well. So again, that's okay. And sometimes you have to take a break.
Thank you all. Thank you so much. Thank you. I can't say it enough. Thank you all for your time tonight. We definitely appreciate all of the great words and the great advice that you've shared with our membership. We truly appreciate your support of the SNMA. And for those of you in the audience, please scan the QR code on the screen to give us some feedback as we work to create useful programming for you all. This was a great session for our Sowing Seeds. So follow us on Instagram at SNMA_official and at SNMA on Twitter, and like us on Facebook. But most importantly, if you are not a national member, please go on and visit snma.org to sign up and get connected. Thank you all for tuning in. Thanks again to our panelists. And I want to also share some information in regards to our Ces Campaign. So this campaign aims to give imagery behind the fact that racism is a public health issue in the United States. The recent murders of our Black sisters and brothers are a clear reminder that this nation is built on the backs of the oppressed and the belief that some humans are of less value than others. We are just living in the aftermath. As future physicians, we will be treating patients who have been negatively impacted by these traumatic experiences. So we stand united at the forefront of defending unity, defending humanity. The SNMA has been committed to supporting current and future underrepresented minority medical students and addressing the needs of underserved communities since its inception, and we will continue to do so. So we just ask you all to share a collage or possibly a black and white image of yourself with your story, your feelings. We really want to hear your voice and your perspective. So tag us at our Instagram account or tag us on Twitter, so that way we can share your images and your stories. And we do have a few more upcoming events. The Sowing Seeds for Pediatrics will be on June 10th. Our Sowing Seeds for OB will be on June 17th. Our Juneteenth event is going to be on June 19th at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So stay tuned for all of this great content coming from the SNMA. Have a good night, everyone.